Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about IT modernization, getting into a lot of conversation about data and a lot of other activities. Wanted to talk about lessons learned. I think that's really important. I'm going to start with you over at DLA. George, give us some lessons learned that you're encountering as you embark on this journey.
Yeah, we we have no shortage of lessons learned. So we just don't want to keep relearning the same ones. But I think probably the biggest learning that we've had so far is that IT modernization, or DBX, digital business transformation that we call it, is really not about technology at all. It's really about change management. It's getting people to think differently. And so the things that seem to hold up the progress are less about technology and more about mental models. So the soft skills are the things that seem to matter a lot more in a digital business transformation than the hard technical skills, which kind of sounds counterintuitive when you start thinking IT. Everybody thinks it's a technical field, but getting people to think differently, embrace a new way of doing business, and getting humans just to change in general is a difficult thing. And so when you couple technology to that, sometimes people feel threatened. Their jobs may change, their jobs may go away. They may feel that they have to learn, get overwhelmed. Stuff that they've been doing for a long time, habit patterns are changing. So we really underestimated how big of a lift the change management side was. And now we're focusing much more on that.
Interesting to sort of, unblock and untether these folks and allow them just to focus on the art of the possible as they embark into this new modern journey. Robert, how about at NASA? No doubt you've had some lessons learned there as you're rolling out these various capabilities.
Well, it's exactly what George was talking about. It's the people factors. How do we change culture to focus on the important things, whether it's cybersecurity, ensuring we've got secure platforms, we're using common controls, things like that. So it's really that culture. And one of the things I've learned, it's actually been reiterated very, very recently, is culture trumps everything, right? It's not about the technology, it's about getting people to think differently and focus on what are they doing and how are they going to do it, and that things will be okay in the long run. Yes, we're always going to be changing. So come with us, come on the journey, and we'll end up in a good place. So exactly the way George described it. And again, culture trumps strategy, frankly, every day.
Right. That's sort of that, I always hear about this red law and blue law. Red laws, are actually laws in writing. Blue laws are these ones that are sort of just formed over time, let's say. Jim, how about at TSA? Undoubtedly, you have a lot of lessons learned there as you're embarking on the journey of modernizing and doing all the various things, addressing the commander's intent, if you will, the administrator's intent.
Yes, at TSA, we've learned as well that IT modernization really isn't about picking a new application and installing it and rolling it out. We've learned that each application comes along with bolted alongside a brand new data model. So this brand new data model is probably something quite different than your organization's currently using. So if you don't take the time up front to really work looking at the data and how the data is going to be used, not just the application. The application is certainly important, but the data is what really drives those operational activities. We know that IT and business do need to work together on these use cases. IT knows part of the solution, the business knows part of the solution. They really need to get together, but they don't. Neither one really understands it all. So not in most cases. So I think that certainly working together and taking the time up front before you just push the easy button and push out a module will really help improve operations.
Right, sort of focusing on that end state in mind, and then working your way backwards to, okay, what steps do I need to do to get to this place we're trying to get to? Well, we're going to circle back, and I'm going to start with you, Katie. And we're going to talk about the future, if you will, not 10 years out, probably not even 5 years out, but what does it look like 3 years out? If you want to incorporate, your top lesson learned in there, have at it. But what does it look like for BMC? What's kind of coming out of the Petri dish, the demand signal that you're getting? And what does it look like when one looks around? What do you all imagine the environment will be at that state?
That's a fantastic question, and we have been doing significant work with some of our, particularly our DoD partners in the edge, and however anyone wants to define the edge.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the concept that we see is going to be, and this isn't just, by the way, for federal, it's certainly not just for Department of Defense, but really for anybody who's got a lot of items in their network that would be considered the Internet of Things. So we're working with organizations, particularly in the DoD, on a concept called a digital twin. So imagine if you take a fighter jet and you use all of the instrumentation that's in that fighter jet and you create a digital copy of that you can monitor, that you can automate remediations if something goes wrong. Think about what that means to the warfighter in terms of the ability to get back up and running, the ability to anticipate problems before they happen, and leveraging a foundation of artificial intelligence to help predict that is going to be huge. And that's going to be in the next 2 to 3 years thing. Our innovation labs are working, not, like I said, not just with Department of Defense customers, but also working with energy utilities, thinking about mapping a digital twin of bulk electric system components. So we see that as truly the future, harnessing the power of the instrumentation and IoT to build out something that's going to fundamentally change the way that people manage their infrastructure.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that everyone is happy to hear that, because we know that edge computing, big deal these days, and the IoT, et cetera, and collection. Thank you very much for that, Stephen. How about at Snowflake? Undoubtedly, you all are cooking up sort of the next generation of what the ecosystem is going to expect as far as interpreting, processing data, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think it continues to build on, what you mentioned, the processing of data is in a lot of different ways, right? Because you've got a lot of different types. You've got the traditional, kind of the business intelligence use case, but you're seeing more and more of the data science use case. And data science is really kind of talking about like AI, right? It's kind of a nebulous term, right? It's really about the business. And so when you think about a data scientist is typically going to be a logistician or somebody else that has domain expertise. And so really starting to look at different business and tuning to, like, medical, for example, the healthcare industry, or logistics, starting to really focus on automating some of the, and I'll use AI as kind of a broad term, use cases from within the data platform itself to deliver on some of those. So I think over, the other thing I think is you'll see the more of the consolidation of, the data across the enterprise, where you're seeing we talk about, you hear about 360 views and things like that, but what does that really mean in the context of the business, right? How do you integrate all that, make it in a way that's searchable, that's relatable to the business? And so we talk a lot about the culture, and part of that starts with working backwards from, my customers in that sense are the logisticians and things like that. So understanding what they need to drive value, and you're going to see some of that creep its way back into these, the data platform itself, so that it's able to deliver that with the lowest amount of friction possible to that community of interest.
A lot of important things to focus on there. We really do appreciate it. Lamont, we had 3G, 4G, 5G, 3 years from now, it'll be table stakes. Is there going to be a 6 and a 7? I mean, what's it going to look like in 2 to 3 years? What can one expect?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a definite possibility of those. We're still waiting and working on those and seeing what there are. But a lot of what we're talking about here today, just, I think with the world the way it is today, we've seen a lot of what we thought would be happening 3 to 5 years from now accelerated into today, and how we need to make sure that we have connectivity to all this different type of information that's out there, whether it's being something that's going to be inside of a mobile edge compute to be able to support all these end applications or the real-time focus capabilities that are out there, and sensors, or connectivity back to things inside of what I would say is a traditional brick and mortar data center or cloud infrastructure. How are you going to have connectivity between those things to make sure that people can work where they need to, how they need to, and in the manner that they need to. And a lot of that needs to look at, when we're trying to make sure there's connectivity and these end-to-end view of the solutions is how do we look at those outcomes and make sure that we're driving to the outcomes of what those end users are going to be, whether it's in the defense space, civilian space, or anywhere that we work in. We want to make sure that we don't fall back on what we look at used to in the past of silos and saying, okay, what is my specific requirement? How much bandwidth do I need, or how much compute do I need? It's really, how do those individual technology pieces fit together to drive an outcome for that end user? And that's what we're looking at here at Verizon when we bring in all the connectivity pieces, the security pieces to secure that, and then how, make sure those applications move and flow from where the data is to that end user that needs it to complete whatever they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the day comes where, let's say a Jim says, look, I just need full motion video in this airport at this time for this length of time. It just sort of happens, right? There isn't a whole lot of wrangling going on in the background. It just, I'll say, appears based on the capability that you have. Jim, 3 years from now, right? You've got your cloud rolled out, you've got your HR stuff rolled out. What does it look like for a field service director? What does it look like for the traveling public? What does it look like for an application developer in that environment 3 years from now? What's the goal? What's the focus?
For TSA, I'm happy to start from an application developer perspective. We've created a self-service data access for developers. We've created this common lookup service. It includes information because it includes the relations of checkpoints and airports and equipment. It's about 20,000 records. It's refreshed every night. The information that it pulls from also tracks what was the previous value, what's the current value. It's all the data management. Who changed it? When was it changed? We want to use that and other techniques to create trust. I think at TSA, until we're able to work across offices better, sharing data, I think that's 2 to 5 years. What we'll have from an equipment standpoint, we will have more sensor technology, we will have more touchless capabilities, but the data still has to tie across the organization. So I think that from a federal data strategy, we will really be able to improve.
Right. I would imagine the day will come when you have sort of this touchless or more touchless environment experience in an airport. And certainly that data needs to be secure, needs to be collected properly, it needs to be integrated properly so that you can make those real-time decisions and enhance that experience and do it in a meaningful manner and respecting the rights and, civil liberties and all those other things that you have to deal with, undoubtedly. Robert, how about at NASA? Are we going to be on Mars in 3 years? Are you going to be in the middle of that? What's going on here? Are we going to the moon? What's happening? Tell us about what it's going to look like in 3 years in regards to your environment and what you can expect to have achieved.
Well, it's interesting. We're not going to be with humans on Mars in 3 years, but the goal is to have, within a couple of years, 3 years actually, have humans back on the moon, the first woman and the first person of color on the moon. So we're working through the Artemis program very diligently to bring all the pieces together to make that happen. One facet that I find really interesting is the communications. Okay, there's no communication set up on the moon right now. And so we're working on something called LunarNet, which would be essentially an internet communications tool surrounding the moon to give our missions the opportunity, both once they're on the moon and also the orbiting missions, the ability to have seamless communications to and from each other and all the way back to Earth. So that's one of the things that we're focusing on from a telecommunications perspective is how do we enhance those communications techniques in space to make sure that they're resilient, reliable, and able to transmit vast amounts of data. So that's one of the things that's really on our plate for 2024. Artemis is actually NASA's overall top priority.
That's where you're really focusing a lot of attention. No doubt that you're focusing a lot of attention on just sort of the bottom layer infrastructure and ecosystem to enable all those things to happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. And what's interesting is the challenges that we have from for space communications. Space is a very forbidding place. There's a lot of radiation. There's a lot of changes that are constantly going on, things that we don't think about, something called space weather. And how do we connect back to the Earth? We have transmission stations all around the Earth, and how can we take advantage of commercial solutions to better utilize the commercial products out there rather than build it ourselves? If we've got communications coming in from Norway, we have a tracking station in Norway. Do we need to own all the equipment there, or can we utilize commercial sector to provide those services, tie us into cloud services, and be able to share the data much quicker, get it back to the sources where we need, et cetera. So we're there's a lot of things going on all around the Earth to improve the way we communicate, the way we exchange data, and the way we are able to meet our mission.
And hats off to the private-public partnership that that NASA has embarked on over the last few years. George, take us home with Defense Logistics Agency. What are you expecting to see over the course of the next 3 years as you embark on those various activities that you've got going on that you highlighted earlier in the show?
Well, I'll tell you something that I'd like to see is that, this whole conversation today seemed to have a recurring theme of data. So data is pretty much at the center of everything that an organization does. You have software, it produces data, and data is tortured to give you insight and to make decisions. So when I look at our job series codes for civilian workforce, the civilian classification codes, there is no civilian classification code for a software engineer. There is not one for a data scientist. There's not one for a data architect. There's nothing for data curators. So in a modern knowledge economy where data is at the center of everything that you do, we do not have the ability to get the right people into our workforce because of our civilian classification codes or our civilian personnel system. So in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, I would sure like OPM to try to correct that so we could start hiring and recruiting the right talent to help us solve these problems.
Very important area to focus on, because it's all about the talent to enable these various things to happen. It's been a fascinating show, and I just want to thank all of you for fighting the good fight and all the things that you do to make this country safe, secure, et cetera, and taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for the program. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.